My name is Colin Shaw from Foresight Engineering, and I'd like to speak a little bit today about Model Context Protocol, in particular, the part about the protocol. So, the protocol itself is something developed by Anthropic. So, you can go anytime you want, search MCP protocol in Google or whatever, and you'll get links to the MCP protocol. Shocker, I know. So let's talk about it a little bit. It's a JSON RPC protocol. What does that mean? RPC means remote procedure call, and that is a way of communicating between a client and a server how the arguments to a particular procedure will be encoded and what they are, as well as the output. And JSON RPC just means that this is communicated via JSON. Back in the day, you'd also see things like RPC over XML and so forth. So now let's talk about how you invoke this. So in your client, so for example, a chat completion client, that client is going to be able to understand how to invoke an LLM that's living on a foreign server because the LLM is significantly larger than probably what your compute capacity is on whatever you're running it on, your laptop, your phone, whatever. So it already has built into it a lot of ideas around how to connect to something that maybe isn't super snappy in response. Maybe, it uses streaming and so forth in order to get relatively slow token output from an LLM on a remote server. So the idea with the MCP is just another extension to this. Knowing that a reasoning LLM is able to communicate, I think I need to use a tool to find some additional resource about something, and you communicated to it something about those tools. On the client side, you can also invoke via RPC, JSON RPC, a model context protocol request for additional context for this model. So the client is becoming the hub, and the spokes are the LLM itself living on whatever the provider's you know uh, infrastructure is, and then the MCP tools that you're exposing to the client. So the way that you can expose them using MCP really is two ways. You can expose them via standard IO, like standard in and standard out, which has some benefits if you're writing something that's maybe local to the machine. Remember, this is coming from Anthropic and basically from coding companion side. So when you're thinking about, well, how does that get, a list of files in a directory, or how does it update some of my code? Well, it's probably using the standard IO method of doing it because it's local on the machine, right? There's not really a perceived security implication to that on your local machine, and you're just executing on that machine. No need to tie up ports or anything in order to do that. The other way of doing MCP is over HTTP. So this is streaming HTTP, much like you would anticipate that it would be streaming HTTP or something like it, talking to the LLM on the provider side as well, because slowness, token creation, and so forth, you want to keep that connection open, right? You can also use server sent events through the streaming HTTP connection um, if you would like to. So one thing that I'm seeing some commentary on is security implications around this. And I would like to say, well, just let's reflect for a second on how a web server works or something like that. So, with a web server, if I'm developing some kind of a service, I'm probably developing it using Fast API in Python or something like it, maybe Flask, whatever. Doesn't matter. But I'm not generally, while I'm developing that, really worried about handling you know, certificates, verifying and validating certificates, doing auth and so forth. I'm worried about developing code that can be served using a standard protocol like HTTP as simply as possible. And the same is true with MCP. Those who are developing these are not usually worrying so much about security as having a fairly easy way of dialoguing between the client and the MCP server to be able to provide that context. So, yes, in a sense, security is a concern. You need to be aware of it, but it's not a flaw in how MPC is built over JSON RPC using HTTP. What you need to be aware of is that you need to, if security is a significant problem, you're using sensitive data, you don't want somebody to see it, you're doing it over HTTP, there's steps that you need to do in order to secure it, just like there are with HTTP for a website. You're going to, with the website situation, you're going to put it behind Nginx or Apache or something and let that handle the certs and let that handle some of the security implications there, right? This is normal stuff. So it's very similar for this situation with MPC. You're not really going to expect MPC to be doing that any more than you expect Fast API or Flask or something in the Python ecosystem to be doing that. You're going to need to implement something like a reverse proxy that happens to have security in order to be able to do that. And that's going to be very context dependent, just like it is with security on certain kinds of services or on the web or whatever. So when you're thinking about this, don't be put off and thinking that MCP is not a good approach to problem solving or to expanding what it is that you're trying to do using your LLM. Just be aware that there's implications having to do with security, and there's additional engineering responsibilities that are going to be there in order to make that successful.